A man walks into a pawn shop and drops a $1.5 million deal on the table. Not a painting. Not a diamond. A 33-ton World War II Sherman tank that fought at Iwo Jima. And it still fires, oh my gosh. The moment this episode aired, it broke the internet. Celebrities started reacting everywhere. TV hosts referenced it on late-night shows. Sports commentators brought it up mid-broadcast. Nobody had ever seen anything like this on Pawn Stars. Rick Harrison standing in the Nevada desert, firing a tank cannon, smoke rolling across the sand, then hearing a price so massive he went silent on camera. But the tank wasn't even the craziest deal that day. A seller walks in with a grenade he paid $5 for. I got you a grenade. Oh, get that thing out of my store. Oh, dude. I took it apart before I brought it in. And an expert calls it the holy grail of military collecting. Another pulls out handwritten math and says Albert Einstein wrote it. Every item that came through the door had a wilder story than the last. The Silver Mountain. A retired electrician named Gary wheels a dolly through the front door of gold and silver pawn. On it are bags of coins and silver bars so heavy the wheels are barely holding. Hey, what do we got here? A whole lot of silver. Let me help you out real quick. The whole counter vibrates when he sets it down. Rick looks at the pile, then back at Gary, then back at the pile. Thousands of ounces of silver. Pre-1964 US dimes, quarters, and massive hand-poured bars, one of which alone weighs almost 75 pounds. I got some 90% silver dimes over here. Some quarters. These bars, Gary says, gesturing across the counter like he's presenting a buffet. Rick steps up and immediately starts scanning edges. Pre-1964 US coins are roughly 90% silver. You can tell them apart from modern coins because modern edges show that telltale copper-nickel sandwich. Pre-1964, all silver, no copper line. It's the fastest way to catch a fake mixed into a real pile. And Rick isn't about to count out six figures without checking every last one. Every coin checks out. Rick weighs the full haul, 3,372 ounces of silver. But the bars make him pause. At this size, legitimate bars are cast in standard round number weights. And some of these don't add up. That could mean a cheap metal core hiding inside, bulking up the weight while cutting the value. So Rick drills deep into each bar, not a surface scratch, but deep enough to rule out a lead center. He melts the filings into a small button and drops nitric acid on it. Pure silver reacts with a distinctive creamy white color. Anything else means you've got a problem. Every bar passes, total value, just over $110,000. I'm really glad my dad taught me to invest, cause today I'm walking out with over $100,000. Well, let's make a deal, Gary says. Rick offers $111,000 even. Gary pushes for $115,000, but Rick shakes his head. There's almost no margin on silver at this volume. The metal is worth what the market says, and Rick's already offering close to the ceiling. It's not like a rare collectible where you can mark it up based on demand or story. Silver is silver. The price is the price. Gary thinks it over for a moment, looks at the pile one last time, and takes the deal, $111,000 in cash for a stack of metal most people wouldn't look twice at. Gary walks out smiling. For Rick, it's one of the biggest single purchases he's made in a while, and the day is just getting started. The $5 holy grail, the next item through the door, puts everyone on edge before the seller even opens his mouth. I got you a grenade. Rick's hands go up. Oh, get that thing out of my store. But the seller, a military memorabilia collector named Dave, who spent 20 years combing flea markets and estate sales across 3 states, quickly explains he's already disarmed it. He took it apart before he even drove to the shop. What he's holding isn't dangerous anymore. But what it represents, that's a different story entirely. Dave sets it on the counter gently. Rick leans in despite himself. The grenade doesn't look right. Rounder than standard issue. Smoother. Almost like someone took a ball and filled it with explosives. Dave says he's seen hundreds of grenades over the years, but never one shaped like this. His theory is that it was made by the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, America's covert intelligence agency during World War II, the organization that eventually became the CIA. Rick picks it up carefully, turns it over in his hands. He's intrigued, but he's not making a move on something this unusual without a specialist. The expert arrives, takes the grenade, and immediately his expression changes. I'm Tony from the gun store here in Las Vegas. Everything that comes in that is unusual or strange or old, they call me. He turns it slowly, examines every seam and marking, and then confirms everything. It's authentic OSS, built during World War II for covert operations behind enemy lines. And the design is both brilliant and disturbing. They shaped it like a baseball. The logic was devastatingly simple. Every American boy grows up throwing baseballs. No special training needed. Just wind up, throw naturally, and the grenade lands exactly where you aimed it. Then the expert says something that stops the room cold. This grenade is like the holy grail of ordnance collectors, and it goes for a ton of money. Rick just stares at it. A full beat passes, then another. You can see the gears turning behind his eyes. This isn't just rare. This is the kind of piece that collectors spend entire careers searching for. Items like this almost never surface on the open market. Most are sealed in private collections, locked in military archives, or sitting in the back rooms of museums that don't even know what they have. The last one that sold at auction went for over $2,000. And collectors still talk about it like someone found a Picasso at a yard sale. How much did you pay? The expert asks. $5. $5 American. The expert almost laughs. Rick shakes his head slowly. $5. For something historians consider one of the rarest surviving examples of World War II covert weaponry. So, how much do you want for it? Rick asks. I'm thinking $1,600. I know how it operates around here. I want to leave you a little room to make money on it. Rick doesn't argue, doesn't counter, doesn't try to talk him down. They shake hands and write it up. A $5 flea market find becomes $1,600. And Rick walks away holding a piece of espionage history that most curators would trade a wing of their museum to display. The doomsday keys. You'd think the day couldn't get stranger. Then a seller drops a pair of old keys on the counter, small, unremarkable, the kind of thing you'd lose in a junk drawer, and says they were used to launch Russian nuclear missiles. That's just a key, Rick says. But what is it a key to? The seller claims these are authentic Soviet ICBM launch keys from the Cold War. The gentleman that I bought them from is a very good friend of a very famous Russian major general. With one turn could have sent nuclear warheads screaming across the globe. Rick picks one up, turns it over. I'm getting chills just thinking about it, he says. One turn of these keys could have destroyed the world, and now they're sitting in my pawn shop. The seller wants $10,000, but there's no paperwork, no provenance, no chain of custody, nothing to verify these are what he says they are. Rick isn't spending 5 figures on a story, no matter how compelling. He calls in a specialist. The expert's verdict flips the entire narrative. These are genuine Cold War launch keys, but not for ICBMs. They were used at Baikonur Cosmodrome, the legendary launch site of the Soviet space program, the same facility where Yuri Gagarin lifted off into orbit and changed history forever. These keys didn't start wars. They sent cosmonauts into space, and paradoxically, that makes them rarer. There were far more ICBM keys produced during the Cold War than there were spaceflight keys. The expert calls them exceedingly rare, a phrase that doesn't come out of his mouth lightly. In the world of Cold War memorabilia, having something tied directly to the Soviet space program, to the same launch complex that sent the first human being into orbit, carries a weight that most collectors would pay handsomely for. The seller holds firm at $10,000. Rick offers $1,500, admitting he's taking a complete gamble even at that number. Without documentation, Rick can't prove what these are to a future buyer. It's all story and no paper trail. The seller shakes his head and walks. He'd rather hold on to a piece of the space race than let it go for a fraction of what the story is worth. Einstein's equations. Corey is behind the counter when a retired professor named Martin carefully unfolds a sheet of yellowed paper and lays it under the glass. The paper is old, visibly old, with rows of dense mathematical notation in tight, deliberate handwriting. I have a piece from Albert Einstein, handwritten math. Corey's expression shifts. He leans forward, studying the page. No signature anywhere. No letterhead. No institutional stamp. Just equations. Line after line of calculations in faded ink that could belong to one of the greatest minds in human history. Really? Handwritten math by Albert Einstein? Yep. So, how much do you want for this? I'm asking $18,000. Without a signature, this is an authentication nightmare. Beautiful if real. Worthless if not. Corey calls in an expert who specializes in historical documents. The specialist takes his time, examining the ink composition under magnification, comparing the handwriting patterns against known Einstein samples, studying the mathematical notation and its era-specific style. Then the verdict: the handwriting is Einstein's. The math is genuine. But the value lands well below the asking price. Without knowing what the equations refer to, what problem Einstein was solving, what theory he was developing, the expert puts it at roughly $5,000. Context is everything in the world of historical documents. A signed Einstein letter discussing the theory of relativity? That's 6 figures easily. Unattributed calculations on an unsigned page, brilliant as they may be, the market assigns them far less. I'd give you $3,000 for it, Corey says. That's the most money that makes sense to me. You couldn't come anywhere near the $14,000 mark. No, $3,000 is what I could do. Martin folds the paper back up and slides it into his bag. He can't go that low. Somewhere out there, he believes, is a buyer who understands what Einstein's handwriting is really worth, context or no context. The $1.5 million tank. This is why Rick left the shop. This is why he drove 40 minutes into the desert heat with dust coating the windshield and nothing but flat scrub in every direction. He'd heard a rumor. Someone had a fully operational World War II Sherman tank for sale. Not a replica. Not a rusted-out shell on blocks. A real, running, firing M4A3 Sherman. The seller, a private military vehicle collector named Alex, meets Rick at the site. The tank sits on open ground, sand-colored and massive, its barrel angled slightly upward, like it's still watching the horizon for incoming fire. The desert wind pushes fine dust across its treads. Alex doesn't waste time with small talk. This thing actually saw action at Iwo Jima. Rick stops walking. Action at Iwo Jima. This one did. It did see action. It was knocked out 3 times in the first 24 hours. Iwo Jima, one of the bloodiest battles in the entire Pacific Theater. Over 26,000 American casualties in 36 days of fighting. The kind of battle where survival wasn't expected. It was lucky it was knocked out 3 times in the first 24 hours, Alex says. 3 times. And they kept putting it back together and sending it back in. Rick circles the tank slowly, running his hand along the armor plating. The steel is thick and pitted, scarred in places where you can tell something hit it hard decades ago. This isn't a museum piece behind velvet ropes. This is a survivor. He climbs inside. The hatch closes over him. It's dark, cramped, and smells like old oil and iron and something deeper, the smell of machinery that was built for one purpose and served it. The same air soldiers breathed 80 years ago while shells exploded around them. Then the engine fires up. The whole machine shudders to life with a roar that Rick feels in his rib cage before he hears it in his ears. The vibration travels through the seat, up his spine, into his skull. They roll forward across the desert floor, tracks churning sand, the suspension groaning under 33 tons of American steel. Then they stop and Alex says the words Rick has been waiting for, "You can shoot it." The main gun fires. The concussion hits Rick's entire body like a shock wave. Not just sound, but pressure, a physical wall of force that shoves the air from his lungs and leaves his eardrums humming. The tank rocks backward on its treads. Smoke pours from the barrel in a thick gray column that drifts across the desert, slow and heavy, taking its time dissolving against the blue Nevada sky. The smell of cordite hangs in the air, sharp, chemical, unmistakable. For a few seconds, nobody speaks. Rick just stands there watching the last wisps of smoke disappear, and the look on his face isn't the look of a businessman. It's the look of a kid who just touched history with his bare hands. "Oh my God," is all he says. The expert on hand confirms what Rick already suspects. Authenticated combat vehicles from World War II with documented battle histories like Iwo Jima are among the most sought-after military collectibles on Earth. Museums compete for them. Governments bid on them. Wealthy private collectors will pay almost anything to own a machine that actually changed the course of a battle. So, what are you looking to get? Rick asks, even though part of him already knows the answer will hurt. I'm looking to get $1.5 million. $1.50 million. Rick goes quiet. The desert wind is the only sound. You can see him doing the math, not just the business math, but the personal math. The kind of calculation that has nothing to do with spreadsheets and everything to do with how badly you want something versus what you can actually afford. He wants this tank. He wants it in a way that surprises even him. This is the kind of item that defines a career. The kind of thing you park in the center of your shop and build the entire legend of the business around. People would fly to Las Vegas just to see it. They'd line up around the block, but $1.5 million. Rick had come out here hoping to spend a couple $100,000, maybe stretched to $500,000, for something truly once in a lifetime. This is 3 times that number. The shop can handle risk. The shop cannot handle a bet this size going wrong. He takes a breath, looks at the tank one more time, the armor, the barrel, the tracks that dug into volcanic sand on an island halfway across the Pacific 8 decades ago. Looks at Alex. "You know, when me and Alex started discussing me buying a tank, I was thinking I could get into something like this for a couple $100,000, Rick says. His voice is steady, but there's something underneath it, regret, maybe. Or just the weight of knowing exactly what you're walking away from, but that's so out of the ballpark for me, man. He shakes Alex's hand. No hard feelings. This is business, but you can tell it doesn't feel like business right now. He walks away, gets back in his car, drives the 40 minutes back through the desert toward the shop with the AC blasting and the dust settling behind him. The tank stays where it is, barrel still angled toward the horizon, engine cooling in the afternoon heat. World War II tanks are always going to have an iconic place in a collector's mind, waiting for a buyer with deeper pockets and the same sense of wonder that Rick couldn't quite afford to act on. The Wild West and the master luthier back at the shop. The day isn't over. Two more sellers are waiting. First, an 1884 Colt .45 single-action Army revolver, nickel-plated. What do we got here? Got an 1884 Colt .45 revolver. Carried in by a guy who admits he doesn't know much about it beyond the year it was made. Rick recognizes the model instantly. These were the Glocks of their day, he says, the definitive weapon of the American frontier, carried by outlaws, lawmen, and soldiers alike. An expert confirms it's authentic, mostly original, and in strong condition for its age. But one serial number doesn't match, meaning a part was replaced somewhere along the line, likely decades ago, possibly during the gun's working life on the frontier. For collectors, mismatched serials bring the value down significantly. Value $3,000 to $5,000. Rick offers $2,000. The seller pushes for $2,500. They settle at $2,000, a genuine piece of Wild West history changing hands one more time. Then a guitarist named Paul walks in carrying a case like he's transporting a newborn. He sets it on the counter with both hands, unlatches it slowly, and lifts the lid. Inside, an archtop guitar he claims was handmade by James DeQuisto, one of the most legendary luthiers in American history. He's had it for 30 years, kept it in a humidity-controlled room, only played it on rare occasions. The finish still gleams. His asking price, $90,000. Rick calls in a specialist. The expert confirms the guitar came from Fender's custom shop and acknowledges DeQuisto's involvement. But there's no solid documentation proving DeQuisto personally built this specific instrument. It may have been a collaboration with another master builder who trained under Jimmy. Without that provenance, the expert values it at roughly $10,000. Paul listens, closes the case, and walks. He's not letting go of 30 years of careful stewardship for a tenth of what he believes it's worth. He'll find the documentation, and if he does, that guitar could be worth even more than $90,000. The cameras stop rolling, the shop empties out. Rick is back behind the counter, the same spot he stood for decades, surrounded by cases full of other people's histories. Somewhere out in the Nevada desert, a Sherman tank sits cooling in the dust, a tank that survived 80 years of time and today survived one more negotiation that didn't go through. Rick couldn't buy it. The numbers just didn't work, but some things aren't about numbers. And the look on his face when that cannon fired said more than any price tag ever could. That's the thing about this job. The best items are the ones you have to let go. If you made it this far, hit subscribe and drop a like.